Okay. Hello and good evening. This is season 2, episode 2 of the composite. I am DN Battle. And excuse me. Glad to be here live. We took about a month off between season 1 and season 2. So we're back with a little bit of talk, a little bit of BS, a little bit of jokes. We'll see what happens. But welcome to anybody that joins me either now or watches the playback. I appreciate the views, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, a little bit about me. My mom was sick for a while, and she was staying with me. And she just went home yesterday, and then she sent a text, and so she's back home now. She's with my dad and my brother. And so, yeah, I didn't really feel like doing my Saturday night party broadcast last night. And I think I've only thus far, maybe I've done one Saturday broadcast. But, it's just partly because, I kind of feel like a talk show is for the week, but another part of it is like, yeah, I was a little sad yesterday. And I'm working on my pronunciation. Something happened, and I was talking to my students earlier in the week, and I realized I was totally mispronouncing the word yesterday. And I'm like, I don't know why that's the case. So that's one I've been working on. But yes, so I didn't do a Saturday party broadcast, but I'm doing a Sunday evening broadcast, right? It's the day of our Lord. So thank you for joining me. So in terms of news elements and stuff like that, it's a slow news week, but not. So one thing that I'm thinking about is the potential government shutdown. But, again, that's news, but it's not, right? Because it's news in the sense that if they do shut down, that'll be terrible for, essential government workers, so on and so forth. But at the same time, that's how our government rolls, right? They, don't come through with the policy that we need. They don't come through with the negotiations we need, and then they shut down. So I feel like that happens frequently. So I want to talk about it, but at the same time, there's not much to say because it happens frequently. What would happen if, in order to be in Congress, in order to be a governor, a senator, right? Like you had a clause that said, yes, you have to, double check and make sure that you're making all good faith negotiations so that the government can continue, so that we can get things done. And there's really no way to enforce it. But I'm just thinking about like if that was a clause, would people maybe approach it in better faith than they do at this point? Because a non-functioning government is not a flex, okay? So I'm here with my doggie. So if you hear breathing in the background, it's her. Okay, let me see. Hey, Zena. Zena. Psst, psst, psst. There she goes. It's raining, and she's not happy about it. So that is that. Okay, so we've got government shutdowns, blah, blah, right? Other things. A lot of celebrity breakups and divorces. I talked about that last episode. And, I think there are certain people that are saying it's like a cosmic thing. Mercury is not in retrograde right now, but there are other planets that are potentially in retrograde. So that has an effect on emotions, relationships, and stuff like that. Yeah. I just think like relationships probably that started like right before or at the beginning of the pandemic, or relationships that, were cycling through a particular rhythm, so to speak, right before or at the beginning of the pandemic. I think that those folks are just kind of cycling off, right? So they're either it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we met right, before March 2020. And so this is kind of a natural progression of where we would end up. Either that or, we were on a particular track and, our relationship extended by another 3.5 years or so. So, we got a good deal out of it. So that's something to think about. Excuse me. As we transition into the fall, I'm asthmatic, and, I notice certain changes in terms of congestion and things like that. But, it's been particularly like interesting as of late. So my apologies. So we've got potential government shutdown, end of celebrity relationships. Other things that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about generation wars. I don't know who started this, but on Twitter, more commonly known as X lately, there have been a lot of Gen Z people going after the Gen X folks, just saying that they were not good parents. And hold on a sec. Hey, Zena. What's the matter? What's wrong? Yeah, she's not happy with the ring. But yes, so Gen Z going after Gen X for not being good parents, saying, listen, you left me with grandma. Now I have kids and you're saying you don't want to babysit. Like, what's up with that? I don't know where this vitriol came from, but I'm in neither generation technically, so I enjoy sitting back and like watching it happen. So I am technically either a super baby Gen X or a very old millennial. So either way, I don't necessarily have a dog in this fight. For I guess reputation purposes, I would prefer to be a super baby Gen X, because millennials have not been getting good press anywhere at any time. It's like everything is millennials' fault. It's like there are not enough houses being purchased. Millennials, stop eating that damn avocado toast and save up and buy houses. And then it's like, oh, this part of the economy is failing. It's because millennials are not doing their part. So it's like, okay. Could it possibly be that millennials as a generation just really don't have enough money? But that's not something, mainstream publications or, podcasts, so on and so forth, want to consider. All they're saying is like millennials are spending their money in ways we don't approve of. So let's wag our finger at them. But yes, all of that being said, not being the focus of the ire at the moment, I'm able to sit back and watch, the Gen Z on Gen X versus Gen X on Gen Z crime. And it's interesting, right? Because, Gen Z is the arguments that I'm seeing put forth, right, are just that, like, well, if I was essentially raised by my grandparents, then, now that I'm a parent, like, why can't you be of assistance? And a lot of the Gen Xers are not even like debating that part of it. They're not saying, no, I was a very active mother or a very active father. They're like, okay, bet. Yeah, you were raised by your grandparents. But guess what? When I had you, I spoke to your grandparents and I communicated with them and they agreed to look after you. So it wasn't, you know, like this unspoken pact between generations. It was, oh, hi, we have a viewer here. It wasn't an unspoken pact between generations. The generations actually, like, communicated and agreed that this was the situation. And then the Gen Xers are like, well, you're just dumping kids on us. And we didn't agree to that. So, want, want. So it's a really interesting debate, because it's when you're thinking about like intergenerational strife, a lot of it I think is just a level of despair and resentment, saying like, okay, as the younger generation, what have you left for me? Right. Talking to an older generation, thinking about what have you left me in terms of wisdom, in terms of any material wealth or material goods, in terms of, I said wisdom already, but like any type of like knowledge and experience, like things that you've learned, from living and just saying, okay, well, I tried that thing and that doesn't work, right? So here, you as the younger generation, you can do better, you can do different. And so it's interesting because how do you quantify what that looks like? How do you quantify whether or not the generation before you has really imparted any wisdom, knowledge, truth, right? In terms of you being able to live in a better way, in a more peaceful way. I don't know how you quantify that, but I think that there are members of Gen Z that are trying to do that. And so that's part of where this dispute comes from. But, in general, when we're thinking about, okay, like generationally, if you could say, okay, Gen Z was technically not raised by Gen X, right? That, their grandparents raised them. And so therefore the Gen X should be those grandparents that raise Gen Z's kids. But where's the conversation about like, well, what are the institutional elements of this, like in terms of, well, there are not really jobs where you can carve out space, right, to be a more active parent, or there's not, right, the universal daycare that you can use to be a more active parent. All of those things, I think come into play as well. So is it maybe more productive to hold our institutions and our policy making bodies, right? I.e., sorry, I just had notifications coming up. Our, policy making bodies, and thinking about Congress and, the House of Representatives and things like that. Is there a way to hold them more accountable, for the current situation, as opposed to the anecdotal elements of, oh, this grandparent did this, but now you're a grandparent and you're not doing that. Pardon me. And there were also some people that had really good arguments in the sense of, they were saying, well, listen, my grandmother, right, i.e. the one that raised you, Gen Z person, had a pension, right? Had a, had death benefits. If you're thinking about the Big Mama model, right? The matriarch of a Black family, right? Because the majority of the people engaged in this discussion are Black. So if you're thinking about the Big Mama model, people are like, well, hey, listen, she had access to a pension, she had death benefits, for Big Daddy and stuff like that. And whereas now it's like, I'm in my early 40s. I don't think I have realistic discussions about retirement and what that might look like for someone in their 40s now. Because I think most of us, to be honest, just assume that we're going to have to keep working. Hopefully we don't die on the job literally, but that's a very real thing that might happen because we don't have any safety nets in the sense of something that is inalienable, right? So our pensions, so to speak, are 401ks. So 401ks are still playing the stock market. That's not a guaranteed thing. If the market crashes out 2 weeks before I'm supposed to retire, yeah, I'm screwed. So we have that. And then, yeah, we don't really have anything else. So Social Security, I've already gotten paperwork. Actually, I have it somewhere around here 2 or 3 years ago. And it basically, if you're reading between the lines, it's like, yeah, at your age, don't even think about getting Social Security because we're not going to have anything left, right? And so all of that being said, I don't think we view that age demographic, right? So if we say 60s and 70s, I don't think someone my age, so whether you consider me like a super old millennial or like a baby Gen Xer, I don't think we, view it the same way the generations before us do, right? Because we don't necessarily, like, in our minds, it's not like a time of rest, right? Because if you don't have that little nest egg, right, you're still going to be working. And so if you're not rested, the idea of then being an active grandparent and helping your child parent their children, right? So, helping raise that next generation when you haven't actually sat down to rest. Yeah, I think that there would be like a lot of contention in that discussion on its face value. Yeah, I mean, for me, what the most interesting thing is the way people are attempting to simplify the discussion and making it a question of personal responsibility. Either you're the type of grandparent that's going to step up and be responsible and help your kids raise their kids, or you're going to step out of it and be selfish and choose yourself. And I don't think it's that simple. Not looking at the labor elements in terms of, right, who actually has the quote unquote leisure time, right, to be that active grandparent. That's crucial. And then also thinking about, right, the ways in which being elderly in 2023 is way different from being elderly in like 1983 or 1993. It's not the same thing. My neighbors are in the hallway. It's overall it's a really quiet building, but we have these bursts of activity in terms of, people wanting to okay, it's quiet now. In terms of people like kind of wanting to talk to one another in the hallway, kids running in the hallway, but it's usually quiet, but we have those moments. So anyway, but yes, the Gen X versus Gen Z dynamics, yeah, it's interesting to watch, because it doesn't involve me. And then, a lot of people were saying like, well, if your own like procreation was predicated on who's going to be able to help me, maybe you shouldn't have kids. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, right? Because, okay, we have another viewer. Yes, this is great. And so it's like, well, if you're factoring in your parents as childcare, that maybe you shouldn't have kids. I thought that was explosive. And, people kind of took it up, and did TikTok video responses and stuff like that. And then, backed off of it. But that is an interesting dynamic, right? Because at that point, you get to the level of eugenics, folks, right? So if you're saying that, childbearing, child rearing should really depend on the support networks that someone has, then what you're really saying is that, lower class people probably shouldn't have kids, right? Because if you think about it, the infrastructure or the support networks are not going to be there as much, right? Because the folks that, I consider myself working class. So the people that I would rely on to like help me, raise a child essentially are all in that working class demographic, right? So it's like, no, there's no, estates that have been inherited or anything like that. It's totally based on, living in proximity to one another and getting by. And so if we're saying that that's not good enough to achieve the American dream, then I think that needs to be a larger discussion, because I don't think that, this country would look the way it has, and we know that we're in a demographic shift, so that can be a different discussion. But I don't think it would look the way it has looked thus far if we were really focusing on, okay, who actually has the infrastructure behind them to procreate, I think a lot of it just comes down to we don't have a society that's really structured for that. If you're thinking about leave, right? Parental leave, maternal and paternal leave. If you're thinking about the lack of universal childcare, all of those things really contribute to people having maybe one or none, And so the interpersonal networks that people negotiate in terms of, getting auntie or, again, big mama to help out, babysitting and stuff like that. If we're saying that that's off limits, right? And that maybe you shouldn't be looking into that, right? Then what we're really saying is there are certain people that should not have children. So that is, to say the least, an interesting dynamic. Okay. Sorry, that is the dog who probably needs to go outside again. Okay. Yeah, I know you can hear her. I could use some daycare here for the pup. All right. Other things that I want to discuss, not too much. Like I said, it was when I started this broadcast, I said it's a slow news week, but not, right. I think that there are major turns happening under the surface, but not really like massive moves. This Shirley Strawberry situation, with she and her husband, or alleged husband, Ernest Williams, that situation, you would think that there was nothing else going on there, but there are still daily updates and developments. So I might do another broadcast about that. Because what does it mean when people perceive you as the, helpful auntie, grandma, whatever, next door, and you're married to a scammer and you may or may not be involved in those scams. So there is a lot to unpack there. But other things, I think that's what I have for now. I'm just really excited that it's season 2 and I'm here to be with you for another episode. And I think I will also do an episode tomorrow, Monday. But if not Monday, then at the latest Wednesday. All right. And I think I'll sign off right now, but, thank you to all those that were able to join me, that, cared to check this out at a later date. And it's the composite with the flying dog that just, jumped up and over me. And I will see you next episode. Bye.